I'm delighted to have you here for the third annual Kelley-Redd Speaker Series. This is a speaker series that was founded by an alumnus who was grateful to two of his professors who felt that he owed a great debt to, and he established this speaker series. 1 year it is in the sciences, and 1 year it's in the humanities. And this is our sciences year. We have with us today Tim Chartier. He is from the Department of Mathematics and Computer Science at Davidson College. He got his BA and MA from Western Michigan, PhD from the University of Colorado at Boulder. He was the very first ever Mathematical Association of America Math Ambassador. He won the Henry Alder Award for distinguished teaching by a beginning college or university mathematics faculty member from the Mathematical Association of America. He was awarded an Alfred E. Sloan Research Fellowship. He did work at the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory, published widely, worked with 65 different student researchers, supervised 4 student publications, 13 student talks and poster sessions. So busy as a scholar, busy as a teacher. He has been invited to lecture just about everywhere you might think of, including Brigham Young, University of Virginia, Virginia Tech, Notre Dame, Western Michigan, Lenoir-Rhyne, Houghton College, Panasonic Center in Japan, National Museum of Mathematics, World Science Festival, University of Tennessee. Well, I'm about a third of the way through. So let me just stop and turn it over to him. He has much more interesting things to say than I could.
Thank you. Great, thank you. I should have put this on beforehand, but I was marveling at how horrible I am at ironing, so I was watching it. All right, so today we're going to talk about possibly how to make you money in March. We're going to talk about math and bracketology. So a year ago, this could have possibly made you $1 billion. This year, not quite $1 billion, but if you could come up with a perfect bracket, it turns out that ESPN would pay you $1 million. And if you just win the bracket, you get $10,000. So I don't know what that sounds like to you, but that sounds better than just like a homework assignment, get a 10 out of 10. So that we'll take some peer into that and take a look at that. Now, one of the important parts of this is that I will show you methods, but one of the things is that in the end, you will make decisions mathematically that would produce your personal bracket. So that's the avenue that we're walking in terms of where we're trying to go. This is one of my main research areas. It's ranking in general. Bracketology has become a research area because in the beginning it was more of a homework assignment, and people just gave it so much attention that in time I wanted to be sure that I could do more than what I was assigning in homework. So we'll talk about some of that as we go. So fundamentally, tonight we're talking about trying to figure out who's number one. That's what we're trying to do. I want to be able to hold that up and tell the world that I am number one. But really, underneath this, we're also trying to figure out who is number 2, number 3, number 5, number 8, number 13, whatever it is. And the question can be, why? Why are we doing that? Why do we need to know all that information? Don't we just need to know who's number one? And it depends what you're trying to do, but there are 2 purposes in ranking. And we're going to talk about both of those tonight. The first one is that sometimes you're just trying to rank the teams according to what they've done over the whole season. So if you're really, really hot in the beginning, that is important in terms of how you've performed over the whole season. The second bullet, if you look at it, is actually talking about that you're trying to predict play. If I'm trying to predict March Madness, I may actually not be that interested in how you played in the early part of the season. Maybe I am, but maybe I'm not. So those are 2 different purposes, and they'll be really important, particularly if you ask a question as we go along. Because one of the first things I'll be trying to figure out is which one are you trying to figure out? Are you trying to do week-to-week predictions? Are you just trying to rank the teams so we can figure out who in the world to have in the playoffs in that Final Four? Are you going to be okay with Ohio State? Not if you're from Michigan, but outside that kind of thing, are you going to be okay with that? And so those are the types of things that we're looking at. And you always kind of have to keep in mind that the underlying ranking method may be distinctly different depending on which of these you're trying to do. The method may fundamentally change when you're trying to predict versus you're just trying to rank for the end of the season, or during the season for that matter, like we see the API rankings for basketball teams right now. So one of the things with predicting is if we're trying to predict what's coming, you want to make the million, you want to win the 10,000. That's great, but if you're trying to predict, it's important to always remember that it will be a cloudy prediction. The goal is really not to be perfect, because within sport there are two fundamental things going on. There is skill and there is luck. I will not predict luck, because luck is inherently random. I am not trying to predict that. Now maybe I am, maybe I build that into the method, but that's a different discussion. Because fundamentally tonight I'm trying to help you discern the skill. Because if you can discern that, you actually have an edge over other people. Because if you're trying to predict and rank all the teams for Division I men's basketball for March Madness, that's 5,000 games. I was having lunch with some students from the College of Charleston today who are working on research methods with myself and Amy Langdell at the College of Charleston. We were talking about what's big data. I have no idea. But I say that data is big when I just can't look at it and figure it out anymore. 5,000 games is more than I can possibly hold in my head. I don't know. That's big enough data. Whether it's big, I don't know, but it's big enough. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to talk about sports ranking in the context of March Madness. The ranking applies to many other fields. It can apply to every time that you put in a query into Google, the order of web pages that comes back is a ranking. That first page is a ranked page that Google says is most relevant to you. In fact, we actually tend to actually see it that way, because we often don't go to the second or third, let alone the next page. I'm actually old enough that I remember life before Google. I remember being told the word Google. I thought it was a joke, because everyone used Yahoo, which in itself was a weird word when it came up. But Yahoo had this directory structure. I want to read about basketball, so I'll go to sports, and then I'll go to basketball, and then I'll go to this. And that's the way you searched. You could put in a word, and when you did, it was just a mess. I mean, stuff came back, and you might have to go 8 to 9 to 10 pages in, and finally you can mine out a page. Oh, that looks like a good one. I still remember it. It was in the college union at my college. Tim, you need to go to this new website. You can type it in, and it comes back like one of the first 5 is actually helpful. It's like, no way. Yeah, you type it in. Type what in? Whatever you're asking about. Now that's crazy. What's the page? Google. Yeah, really. I just thought they were like trying to act like they were like a 1.5-year-old. You know what I mean? Like, what's the page? You know what I mean? It's like, what are you talking about? But that's the point. Google fundamentally figured out a way to mine out that information that no one else had. And that made Google the Google that you know today. That's why Brennan Page left grad school to work on this, but never went back. But underneath that, you need to remember something or learn something if you don't know it. Yahoo turned it down. They offered that. They said, here is our algorithm, will you take it? And they said, no, but come back when it's fully developed. They have not yet gone back. If you take a second and think about it, would you buy it? I would now for like $1 million, but I mean, really. Do you really know it's going to work? When I show you the methods later today, at some point, somewhere in your mind, you may go, really, that works? You don't know until you unleash it on the data. You will not know if the method that you come up with at the end of the night or in a month as you think about it will work until March Madness happens. But that's part of the madness and the joy of what makes us try. Okay? All right. So if you are not a March Madness fan but decided to come because of a strong sense of allegiance to the Honor College, let me explain how March Madness works. On March 15th this particular year, there will be Selection Sunday. On Selection Sunday, the initial pairings of teams will be announced, and then it's at that moment that you know who will play in what's called the first round of March Madness. Those pairings you know. That is Sunday around 5 o'clock. Before that, you do not know all of the pairings. You know basically sort of who might be in the tournament, but you still don't know who will play who. It's announced on that Sunday who will play, and you have until the tip-off of, there are these play-in games, and let's just act like those don't happen. When we get to 64 teams, when that tip-off happens on Thursday morning, you can no longer do any bracketology. So you can do all the preparation you want. The College of Charleston students and I, we're already working on this. We've been working on this. Davidson students, we're always working on this. And we're working, but on that, the moment that's released, it is like a sprint. It's like the Usain Bolt of applied math. We're just like, and just trying like crazy to do everything we can and look at the method and see if we believe it, see if it's working for this year, and then adapt it if it's not. So if you want to do this, it's like math on the sprint. So if that's attractive, if you're like, I have a weak adrenal, I don't think I can. That's all right, but that's what we're doing. So what will happen is you predict who you think will win in that first round. So then you'll have second round matchups that you've predicted. From there, you then determine who you think will win the second round to have those third round matchups, and you just keep going until you get your predicted national champion. You put that into some kind of bracket tournament. That's your bracket. You write it out or enter it online. And then for each correct prediction, you get some sort of point. In the ESPN one that I'll talk about later, you get 10 points for each correct prediction in the first round, and then for each round, the number of points for a correct prediction is double that of the previous round. Okay? And people do it in different ways in terms of the way they do it. That's the one I do. So overall, it can seem like this really shouldn't be that big of a deal. There are 32 games in the first round, and there's 16 games in the second round. You're only talking 63 games. That's it. That's all you have to do. Just predict 63 games. I mean, seriously, what's the madness about? The madness is maybe the Sports Center coverage. That's what's the madness. No, not really. And you can see that if you actually look at the tournament. So in 2014, last year, out of 11 million brackets submitted to ESPN's online tournament, there were no perfect brackets after the first 32 games. That's in 2 days, Thursday and Friday. It's been shown that the productivity in the United States massively drops. You're going into the military. To me, if you're part of like the NSA, that's when you put us on high alert. We are just open to all kinds of nasty things to happen in the U.S. because we're just like, March Madness. It's just the way that our minds work. Think about that though. 32 games, the first matchup, if you follow this, some of those games aren't even hard to predict. A 1 versus a 16. If you come up with a bracket method that says the 16 is going to beat the 1, you might want to rethink that method. I mean, that's never happened. Now, maybe it will. And when it does, that's all we're going to hear about for a very, very, very long time. But the chances are small. So a lot of those games, we know what the outcome is going to be. So it's not really 32 games, right? And yet nobody in 11 million people got it. Then Buffett last year had $1 billion prize. Now some people got the first round, but by the second round, people were completely out. One of the big games in the second round was when Mercer College beat Duke. I was at a conference with people from Mercer College when that happened. It was a math and arts conference. We were out doing like mathematical, this just makes the conference sound even worse, but we were out building a mathematical structure, which is actually fun if you're a mathematician and, what else are we going to do? You know what I mean? So we were out there and we were building this thing. And all of a sudden somebody came out and they say, oh my gosh, to the Mercer faculty, you guys just beat Duke. The faculty turned and they looked at them. This was, I'm totally serious, this was his response. Now what? At a spelling bee. What are you talking about? They're like, at March Madness. And they go, what? You just beat them in March Madness. And then suddenly one of the professors was like, just kept working on the math structure trying to absorb this, and then suddenly went, I have a player who played in that game. We didn't even create a backup plan. We have a quiz on Friday that I said there's no exceptions to. There didn't need to be an exception. We were going to lose. And so anyway, that's part of the reason that you get these types of instances going on, is because, maybe Mercer would win that game, but maybe, just maybe, it's like an unfair coin. It's 99% likely that it's going to come up heads, which means Duke's going to win. They could play 99 more times, and Duke is going to win, but not on that day. I already talked about that, right? Remember that? Skill and luck. And you just live with it if you play within this realm. Okay, so first of all, how many options are there? How many total brackets are there? That's part of the reason it's so hard to create a perfect bracket. Well, it turns out it's 2 to the 63rd. Well, what is that? I mean, I can't even wrap my head around that. Well, this doesn't really help. It's 9 quintillion. I didn't even know the word quintillion. I'm just interviewed enough about this. I had to learn the word. Now it's permanently burned into my. Not only do I know it, my 8-year-old daughter knows it. How many brackets are there? There are 9 quintillion. What is that? It's 9 with 18 zeros after. After that, she has nothing to say. But it's just like she's heard her dad talk about this so much. In fact, she had the best bracket for a little while in the family. You want to know why this was excellent? Remember skill and luck? She picked Dayton. She picked Dayton for a while. You want to know why? Her name's Michaela. Michaela said, I just like the word Dayton. I mean, I just don't think that comes into a basketball game. All right, here we go. And Dayton. You know what I mean? It's just, man, we came up with a bad Davidson. Clank. You know what I mean? It's just not what's going on. But that's part of it nonetheless. How big is this number? How big is that in terms of the number of brackets going on? Well, if you could produce 1 billion brackets per second, unique brackets every second, you're never repeating. Take a second in your head. How long do you think that would take? You don't need to tell me just how long. A year, 2 years, a day, 10 minutes? It's already done. 300 years. Okay? That's how many unique brackets there are. That's why this is hard. That's what you're mining through. Which one of those will happen? And it's not just skill, it's luck. And you don't know where the luck will be. Because seriously, Mercer beating Duke? Mercer fans were surprised that they beat Duke. Okay? So, that's kind of interesting. This is actually red in the book. I don't know how to, that's my death act. I'm going to show you a couple things that come from my book called Math Bites. And it's a book on a lot of different topics, like you learn to create what are called M&M mosaics. That's what this is for. So you can input a picture, and then it pops out how you can make it with M&Ms, which I think there are better things to do with M&Ms, but it's still kind of fun. So, and then there's chocolate-covered pie. I know there are 2 children in the audience. There are also mazes that you can do, but the chocolate-covered pie is a fun one for Pi Day, which is March 14th. And this is 15, so it's 3/14/15 this year. And so there's a National Museum of Mathematics, and they're going to do my Pi Day activity. So it was funny when they called. We want to do your Pi Day activity, your candy pie. So what's your biggest hit on this? Buy more than you need. What do you mean? I can guarantee that the children will eat more than they use for the math activity. So anyway, hopefully they take my advice. All right, so here are a couple things. First of all, I tried this method. I literally just flipped a coin. I just flipped it to decide who the winner was. So that's 50-50. 50-50 means that you have 9 quintillion brackets, because that's saying that on every single one, it's equally likely. There's a 50% chance that either person can win. And I was kind of surprised. I was like, I wonder how that'll do. Now, clearly, you could come up with the best bracket, right? It could work. And I just did it, and I ran it, and I looked at how I did in the ESPN challenge, so how many points I got. And out of 8 million brackets that year, I was averaging only 1.7, I only beat 1.7%. It turns out, like when I teach my students, like if you were up at Davidson right now and we were part of a bracket class and we just decided to meet at night in this room, I would actually point out that's really hard to do. If I told you, you can either make a bracket that can be in the 70th percentile or above, or make a bracket that can be lower than 2%, you want to make a good bracket before you do that. That's really hard to come up with really bad brackets. So 2 years ago, I had a Davidson student who came up with a bracket that was in the 0.4 percentile. That's a really awkward conversation. Because I thought, wow, I kind of want to know what he did, but did he do that on purpose? His name was Knight. I said, Knight. So I'm really interested in what you did. So 0.4 percentile, that's really hard. What can you share about that? See, that shows that I have taught for a while. I totally covered my bases on that. In no way did I project to him that I did not know which way he did this. The problem is, Knight knows me really well. So he just goes, yeah, whew, really a bummer. Now where am I supposed to go with that? So I went, yeah, it was. And then I turned my back, and then everyone thought I couldn't hear them, and they all looked at each other and laughed. It turned out that Knighton picked he kept coming up with a way that would predict Davidson would win the entire tournament. So as long as Davidson won everything, he had the best bracket ever. And so, yeah, if you guys make the tournament and you seem to be on the weaker side this particular year, then just come up with that, and then you can email me and go, hey, 0.2 percentile, or whatever it is that you do. So, but maybe you'll win in the first round, which would be great. Here's another one. Sometimes people try patterns. They have favorite colors. Here's a pattern. Every national champion since 2004 had blue in its color scheme except for Louisville in 2013. I'm not sure that really plays into things, because if you kind of think about it, well, how many of the outfits have blue in their color scheme? Maybe that's helping too. This is the one that just totally blows my mind, because it's just like, who in the world even thought of asking this? A human mascot for a national championship team has been 10 times more likely than having a reptile. How many of them have a reptile? Yeah, we're the scorpions. I don't know. I don't even know what that was. I didn't even know there was one. It could be like infinitely times more likely. Infinitely more likely than having a cereal brand. You know what I mean? The Battle Creek Kellogg's, or I don't know. But I don't know. Anyway, I thought those were interesting. But why do what I do? And this is why. This usually helps people to begin to understand. Because I make all this thing about luck. And it's like, then why do it? Why, if I can't be perfect, why not do it? Well, that's something in life, right? We can strive to be perfect. You can strive to be the perfect cadet, strive to be the perfect soldier. But life is really not fundamentally going to be perfect. Life will happen and life will evolve. And it's as much about the ways that you adapt as anything else. It's one of the things that I think people learn in math, is how to adapt. Because we call them problems because they are. You do not know how to do them most of the time. And then you adapt. Well, one of the things about the research methods is that historically, people have been 70% accurate in picking teams. It's not 50-50. 70% of the time, people tend to know who's going to win a game. So if that's the case, rather than 1 in 9 quintillion, which is the 50-50, does everybody follow that? If it's 50-50, then you have 9 quintillion brackets. You have well, not 9 quintillion, but you do have 9 quintillion brackets. There's a 1 in 9 quintillion chance of having the perfect bracket. If you get up to 70%, now your odds are 1 in 5.7 billion. That's a significant drop. I actually know the word billion. I didn't know the word quintillion. Then all you do is you go up 1%. That's it. You go up 1%. And what happens? Look at that drop right there. You go up 2%, and that's everything. Amy Langville, again at the College of Charleston, that's why if a student says 1%, we're like, what? How much data? How many years? Over 10 years, 1%. Whoa, really? In fact, I was so proud of my researchers one time. They said, oh, man, something's wrong. Really? Yeah, woo, today's not going well at all. What happened? Man, our method, it's 14% better. We are doing something crazy wrong. And they were. It took 2 weeks to figure it out. 2 weeks to figure out. It turned out that they were using future data, future information in a really subtle way that was really hard to see. I was proud of them for that, because sometimes it's just things are too perfect. Okay? So that's what we're trying to do, and that's why it can make subtle, small changes in terms of what you're doing. So first of all, I want to show you a couple things. I'm going to have you talk. You've been very quiet, which I respect that, but I want you to actually talk with each other. And so we're going to look at graphs, and the way it's going to work is that the winning team will point to the losing team. So in this case, Davidson is pointing at Wisconsin. And this game actually happened when we were on our journey to the Elite Eight, but I will still point to them. And that's one way to remember it. It's the poor sportsmanship graph. I beat you, and I will keep reminding you. So it's like the elementary school playground graph. Okay? So does everybody have that in mind? It's very important. You can flip it and decide, I don't really feel comfortable with that. I can do it the other way. That's fine. It's just a convention. So you can choose. All right, so here is our first graph. So can you talk to someone next to you? How would you rank these teams? But before you start, I'm going to show you several, and there may be some graphs that you do not agree on. If you don't agree, you don't need to agree. Listen to each other for what you say, because it's in those moments of disagreement that you can find a new research method. Okay? All right, so talk to each other on this one, and we'll look at a couple more in a moment. to everybody. C lost only to D. A beat only B, and B lost to everyone. We usually call this the perfect season, because generally people will agree that a sensible way to rank these are going from highest ranking to lowest ranking in terms of strength. D, C, A, and B. Okay? All right, let's look at another one. Oh, first of all, so this is actually from 2 years ago. This is what happened up in North Carolina. Now I can tell I'm not in North Carolina. If I was in North Carolina, I would now build in a 2-minute break to listen to the arguments within North Carolina. Like literally. It just blows up. It's like, you know, it's just, and then it just all happens. But that's actually why I make the point. The point is, somebody from, for instance, NC State may be like, okay, fine, all right, I'll concede that we lost to Duke and we lost to UNC, fine. But you lost to so-and-so and we beat them. Or we beat this team that beat the team that you lost to, and so forth and so on. That, if you think that way at all, that's exactly what we're going to bring into our method. Even though there are 64 teams in March Madness, we will actually rank 350 teams. Dude, why? We do it because of this. We want all of that information. In fact, some of my collaborators actually, that's only Division I. They'll bring in the Division II and III games as well. I don't do that because I think it induces noise. That when a Division I team like Davidson, when we play our Division III team over Christmas when the students are gone, we actually sometimes can be favored to win by 60 to 70 points. Like if you look at the method, we don't win by 60 to 70 points. There comes a point when they're ready to put me in the game. You know what I mean? It's just like, well, let's just laugh at the math prop. You know what I mean? Well, I grew up in Philly. You know what I mean? So anyway, so we don't win by that. But by the fact that we don't, it actually makes us look weaker and that team we beat look stronger. So sometimes you have to kind of take that into account. All right, let's try another one. So this is the one you just did. You recognize that? You've been away from it for about a minute. This is the same exact structure, but I changed the labeling. Everybody see that? It's the same. Okay? All right, good. So now, let's do this. F beats D. All right, so talk about that with, if you didn't like the partner, just kind of, yeah, I want to try somebody new. But whatever, just talk to somebody about this. Okay. I always try to stop you before you start putting teams onto it. Yeah, you know, that team right there, that's when, you know, and when I did it at Virginia Tech, that's where they started. It was like the math department. It was, I don't know who else came, where they just like have a math department that normally doesn't come to the talk. It was like, the wall was lined with people. And then I showed that. Yeah, that's that Virginia Tech game where they played, and they just like, that was the way they thought. It was like, geez. So I just let them talk and kind of work it out. But nonetheless, it was therapeutic. All right, so let's change. Now let's have E beat D. Okay? Talk about that. See what you think would be the case there. And again, you do not need to agree. And you don't even need to know. Just try what you can figure out. Okay. So I would say that the hardest part about this one, in comparison to the previous one, is the fact that you have E beating D. So maybe you're willing to say E is better than D. But then I kind of don't know what to do after that. Maybe I'm willing to say E than D. I'm not even sure I can say that. I just know that E is at the top. But then things get kind of hard. But there's another dynamic in this that I also want to point to. What I want to point to is the fact that what made the difference. Now there are a lot of things going on in between these two. But one of the things is that probably the difference between these two losses of D made a difference in how you thought it would rank. That's the quality of the loss, the strength of the schedule, the strength of the team that you're playing. We want that in a ranking method, and winning percentage does not do that. Just looking at the record is not enough. You need to know who they played, when they played them, and how well that team was playing at the time. Now, some of that we'll do, and some of that we'll get to a little later, but that's what we're wanting to do. So we're going to look at methods that were used up to a year ago by the Bowl Championship Series. And what Amy Langville and I did is we adapted those methods and applied them to bracketology. So that's what I want to show you today. This uses linear algebra. You've done linear algebra. You did it probably even back in middle or high school. X plus y equal 5. X minus 2y equal 8. Why? Because it can help you rank. That is why. It can make Google $1 billion. It can help you win a March Madness bracket. It helps cars run faster. That's when they say they build the car and then they simulate the car in the computer. That's what they're doing. Pixar, if you took linear algebra, if you took it, you learned something called eigenvectors. What was it and why did I learn it? Every single image that you see in a Pixar film is due to an eigenvector. From the buildings to the characters you see. That helps them build it. That's why we use it here. It's a very, very powerful tool. But why do we use it here? Because of that interdependence. My ranking depends on your ranking if you and I compete. I am dependent on you. X plus y equals 5. The value of y will influence the value of me. We're tied together in terms of what we have to figure out. Okay, so we're going to apply this specifically to bracketology and what we're doing. So I'm not going to go through the math of it. I'll give you a link in a minute to look into that. But I wasn't sure of the background of everybody, so, and honestly, I'll have a computer program that will do that part for you. It's another part of the math that you have to do. What will happen is that it'll pop out a rating for the, or I'm sorry, a ranking for the teams. It will be a rating. What happens is that there's a difference between a rating and a ranking. A rating is a number, and it just in some sense is a numeric number associated with the team. The higher the number, the more strength is associated with the team. The number can mean different things for different methods, but let's just let that go for now. So once I've gotten the rating, I rank those from highest to lowest, so in descending order, and that gives me the ranking for the team. Then the way you build the bracket is that you look at the pairings. So here I have Davidson beating Charleston. And out of my friendship to the College of Charleston, I feel okay telling them that they're going to lose because it's not where I'm from. Then I have Furman beating App State. While I enjoy both schools, I have collaborators at Furman, so I'm going to let them win. And then Davidson will beat Furman according to my system because Davidson is ranked higher. So that's like the Knighton approach. I'm going to keep going until Davidson's at the top. Okay, so that would have been kind of the dynamic you would see. Does everybody understand? That's what you'll do. I'll show you a web page. There'll be some decision you'll make. They'll pop that out, and then that's the way you make your ranking. I mean, your bracket. Okay? All right, so if you want the details behind the math, there are several places you can go. In 2 weeks, I'm launching an edX MOOC, which is a massive online course. Just go to edX, and I guess put in my name would be the easiest way. And it'll launch in 2 weeks, and it's on linear algebra. In part one, we'll port all the way down to middle school, so it's very simple linear algebra. And it deals with largely computer graphics with some data mining. And John Brankus of ESPN Sports Science is going to pose a question that everyone can try in baseball. So if you like baseball or sports, you might want to give that a whirl. Because if you solve it in a unique way, John will get to see it, and you get to have John Brankus see your stuff. You could go to my Udemy classes. Well, the edX is free. Udemy is also free, and I have one on bracketology. Then there's a book by Joe Gallion on math and sports that has the full details of the method, with a chapter where Amy and I and 2 students wrote. But all of this is online. It's the math awareness from 2010. So I don't really understand, unless you just really need something bound, I don't really understand that. And then I have a book that came out a month ago through the Mathematical Association of America that has quite a few details in it as well. Okay, so you can look at those if you're interested. But this is the part that I need you to understand, is that if you're going to do these methods, the best way to create a bracket, because right now, the brackets I'm talking about, it's just all of us would get the same thing. We'd all get the same bracket, so we'd either all win or all lose, and that's not very much fun. So instead, what the research that Amy and I did was to fold in what's called weighting. What is that? That is where you decide what do you think is predictive in the way that someone will play in March Madness. Is it that they're hot going into the tournament? Is that they're hot up to but not including the conference tournament? Is that they can win at home, that they can have the long winning streak, whatever it is. Whatever that is, then that's what you weight as higher. So if you and I decided we're just so into this is amazing, and we're just going to play ping pong, and we're going to use this method to like rank ourselves playing ping pong. Then you and I play, and then if we decided that we're going to upweight this game because it's right now, and I'm giving a talk, so I'm better. So that's going to be like Tim trying to play well in a ping pong tournament. Then we would decide, for instance, that because it's more important, it would count as like 1.5 games rather than one game. It isn't just one win and one loss. So if you won, you would get 1.5 wins, and I would get 1.5 losses. If it wasn't important, then it would be like maybe a quarter of a win and a quarter of a loss. But you have to make that equal. What you win has to be what I lose. How do I know that? Because the first time I did it, my student researcher and I came up with a completely sensible thing to do in our mind. And it turned out that when you applied it to the method, it was to your advantage to lose. That is not a good predictor method, I can guarantee you that. You're like, what the heck? It turns out it violates the derivation of the method. You can't do it. And so the method falls apart. Okay? So like one that works really well that you'll see on the webpage, I'll give you in a second, is to decide how many pieces do you want the season to be broken into. Here I've said 2. Maybe it's 4, maybe 8, whatever it is. And then for each one, you just input the weight of the game. So this is saying in the first half of the season, each game is worth half a game, so half a win and half a loss. In the second half of the season, each game is worth 1 win and 1 loss. This is where you make your own bracket. How would you do that? What would you do? You can go to my webpage, and if it doesn't fit what you want, then you go to the webpage that lets you download the code. And it's in Python, Java, and MATLAB right now that you can get to that. Okay? And you can email the Honors College, and the code is not publicly available. But there's no issue with sharing it with you. Just email and I'll quickly share it with you. Okay? So you could try to put it in yourself. If you're an econ major, put in that kind of stuff. I don't even know what you're doing. Just eat it as something all the time. You know, all these damping things and so forth. Okay? Whatever you could dream of. So here are a few that we tried. Beating teams of similar ability. Upweight that. That was one of the best constant methods from year to year that we came up with. Winning at home or away. First time I ever assigned this as a homework project. The brackets did much better than they had done in the past. A sustained winning streak. Your ability to do that. That was the only method we had that predicted Butler was it 2011, 2012, I forget which year. And winning close games. That one we actually are not sure yet that's a good predictor, but it is I don't know. I'm not sure. I think maybe that's just come up with Charleston right now. Look at that. Okay? Oops. There we go. So what would you do? What would you put in? And that's what you can try. So what we've done is we input our brackets and we put them into the ESPN Tournament Challenge, which has anywhere from 4 million brackets to last year was 11 million. You get 10 points for each correct first round, and it doubles each time after that. So in 2009, this was a research project. Amy and I had come up with the research that said that you could do this bracketing, you could do this weighting, and we're like, how do we test that? Amy was like, you know what, I think we could put it into bracketology. I think maybe that would work. Well, at the time, I think I would have been happy if we had been in the 70th percentile, meaning 70% of normal people who are doing more than just math. We never overrode the math, regardless of what it said. Just like our homage to math. Oh, and then we just put it in. That's just what we did. 97th percentile was our best bracket. That was crazy. How did we get that? Well, not all of them were that, but a lot of them with these kind of methods were quite high. The next year I made it a homework assignment, and the best student bracket, all of them were 78% or better that year. The best one was 99, and he would point out 99.9 percentile. And then this is the website, marchmathmas.davidson.edu. And in 2014, 12,000 people used it between Selection Sunday and that tip-off. The Wednesday before it, 3,000 people used it in 3 hours. It hit Reddit, and a lot of people read it. And so anyway, if you can't remember this, you can just put in my name in bracketology, and you'll probably find that because it was covered in various places that you see here all of last March. Okay. Well, I want to just very quickly kind of walk through some other applications because maybe you're not from the United States, so like brackets are fine, but I don't really care. Or maybe you want to go, it's like I kind of like analytics, but I really don't necessarily need to do sports for the rest of my life. So I want to show you some of those. One of the interesting ones is that there was an application to soccer that I did with a colleague, and then a recent Davidson alum made one that kind of had a similar thing where you got scores, and he created one that was in the 98th percentile, which really surprised me because this research was not geared toward really thinking through how to make the method fully predictive. So this was a student who just sat on his own and figured it out. But there's a lot of open room for this. If you are really into soccer, it's hard. It's not basketball. It's very different. The teams don't take every game the same. You've got friendly matches, and we're not friendly, so I'm not going to play that way, and so forth and so on. Okay? Really quick, there's an important thing that just happened, and it happened twice. And what that is that if you think about it, I started with that method being applicable to football, right? Then I took it and I applied it, and then it became applicable to, there it goes, to soccer, to basketball, and then to soccer. That's one of the things that you do in applied math, is you take an idea, and then you simply oh, my clicker's getting worn out. Let me turn it off and then back on. Sorry, my computer's on the other side of the room, so I need the clicker to do it. There we go. Is that you take an idea, and then you just recycle it. It doesn't mean it'll work. It'll probably have to be adapted, but it'll help you with that. So to give you kind of a feeling for that, I'm going to talk about this particular example. I had a Davidson student working with me. And on the Friday, he'd been working on bracketology. He gave a presentation to a group called Sortable.com. And they were working on applications. So on Friday, he was working on bracketology for basketball. I think it was primarily what Seth was doing. He gave this talk to Sortable.com on Friday. On Monday, they hired, that was his last day with me. On Monday, he was an intern for them. Working on what? Working on cage fighting. So mixed martial arts fighting. And the reason that this is behind them is not because they have a chess piece on their shoulder, but because they were using a ranking method called ELO, and it wasn't for which it's used for chess. And our method was actually 13% better. Can you feel that? What I would be thinking in that? We may need to try that a few more times, because I'm not sure I'm really willing to say it's always going to be 13% better. But on their data, it was 13% better, which was pretty cool. Particularly given that I have no idea what's going on. I mean, I don't know much about what's going on with basketball. I know even less of what's going on with mixed martial arts. So beyond ranking, one of the places that this kind of work can be interesting is it can open you to other types of research. So one of them is that last summer we worked on a fantasy sports algorithm. In a sense, it's ranking because like you get the salaries, but if you really kind of think about it, it's not quite ranking in the same way. So we came up with if you do fantasy sports, like what should those salaries be? It's actually a hard problem. There's what's called the knapsack problem in there. Because you need it to be hard enough that you can't just have all-stars, because then we all have the same team. But it needs to be easy enough that you don't have to sit there for 8 hours trying to figure it out unless you're just obsessed. And then you're just going to do it no matter what anyway. So that was an interesting one. I worked with the Davidson student on that. Right now, and last year, I've worked with the NBA on officiating analytics. That one's, some of these, part of the reason this is here, is it falls under confidentiality. So what are you doing? That's all I can say I'm doing. So I'm doing that. What is that? That's what I'm doing. So anyway, it's just what it is. But that's kind of fun. If nothing else, it just sounds cool. I'm working for the NBA. Really? Wow, you're short. Yeah, I'm not. So anyway, it's like last year, Maxim Magazine emailed me. Hi, I'm an editor for Maxim Magazine. I would like to interview you. Hey, wait, I think I read that wrong. He's like, you're from where? From Maxim Magazine. I'd like to interview you. So then I went to just Google and put it in. Maxim Magazine is what I think it is, right? It's like the swimsuit type. It's like, there's Sports Illustrated swimsuit. This is swimsuit all the time. It's like Maxim. Yeah, no, that's Maxim Magazine. I was like, on what? And so it was on bracketology. So I will tell you now, same thing I tell my students. It turns out that tonight, you have learned something that can get you in Maxim Magazine. Because I was in Maxim Magazine. So my students, well, they actually never pointed out. But nonetheless, it's something that can be relevant. Another one is that we've worked, you may not be from the South, but Charlotte is one of the centers of NASCAR. We have a lot of the shops right around us. So we've worked with NASCAR shops, particularly Michael Waltrip Racing, on various analytic problems, one of which right now is ranking, but some of which have not been ranking. Last year we had 2 interns, oh sorry, they didn't worm for them, they worked for them. They did the worm, they were really into ranking. Anyway, they, and then one worked for them last term, and actually one's working for him now. I thought he wasn't started yet. He told me 2 days ago it was. And they're working on simulation projects, and that's another NDA one. I can't talk about what, but that's what they've done. The neat thing for me is that 2 of the students who worked with me last year, one got a job with the Sixers and one with the Bulls. So if that's your dream job, there is hope. So they just did a lot with anyone they could when they were an undergrad to try to focus in on analytics. So one of the biggest things I'll say to you is that I work on who's number one. That's all I was interested in when I started. And then over time, it did open up applications in different areas. I'm sorry, I skipped the Twizy one. That was earlier. That was ranking Twitter. That's a company in London where if you were to go downtown Charleston and tweet about where you ate, they would get that tweet within 5 minutes, and then they would take that to see how they would rank restaurants at this current moment based on what people are saying. The computer science professor in our department that's in artificial intelligence took the tweets and ranked them on sentiment by saying, is it positive or negative? That's what he does, because I have no idea how to do that. And then once I got the sentiment, then we tried to rank them, because the sentiment is scored. If you think about it, it's a form of a score. So that was that application. So what I would say to you, this is like a Davidson, this was so funny, they said, we want you to write on this clear, it's like a beautiful mind moment, you know, it's like, I'm so good at math, I write on translucent things. You know, I don't know. Now that we've all been inspired by this talk, I brought whiteboard markers, let's all go to the back and write on the windows. So anyway, but these are the students, and they said, can you just write something and look like you're doing research? This is me actually posing every possible March Madness idea I had. And all 5 of these students were working on it all of last February, preparing for the tournament. So that's where you are right now. You don't know everything I've done because there are new things coming up with students all the time. But you're at a place right now where you can take what I've told you and you can make it your own. You can make your own bracket and you can beat every single Davidson student that I teach. You might even beat the Charleston students as they create their brackets, but maybe they'll beat you. You don't know. But the best part is, regardless of how you do, you step into analytics, which is a huge field in today's world. You step into sports analytics, which if you're the sports fan, that's like the dream job if you like math and sports. But if nothing else, if you hate sports and you love math, for the first time in your life, you can just put something in there and get a bracket out and possibly beat people in your family. And that's what I found the most with Davidson students, is that if you want to know the honest truth, if you're a huge sports fan, work with somebody who isn't. Because it's usually the non-sports fan that wins the pool in math-based brackets. Because if you're a huge sports fan, you're going to overfit. What does that mean? You're going to make that thing say what you would have said anyway. So get someone else involved. And then talk about the math and see what unfolds. And that's why I do bracketology. Thank you for your attention.
We have some time for questions.
Any questions? I can tell you some other stories.
Talk about it seems like an exploding field of sports and analytics. Teams are looking for a statistical edge.
One of the biggest things, the question was, can I talk about the exploding field of analytics and sports analytics? Yes. One of the biggest things is not every team believes in sports analytics. Definitely not every coach does. Is that every NBA team now has a sports analyst, partially because there's sport view data, which takes over 25 frames per second of the XY position of every player during the game and the XYZ coordinates of the ball throughout the game. It's about 50 megabytes or gigabytes of data for each game. And nobody really knows what to do with it. We're excited about it, but it's just kind of information overload. So you'll see things on ESPN that are clearly coming from that. LeBron James ran 4.8 miles yesterday. Okay. Why do I need to know that? You know, and things like that. But it tells you other things too. There was one game where, not Dwayne Wade, the Oklahoma Thunder, they came from Texas, I just blanked on his name. Kevin Durant. They found that if he dribbled more, his efficiency at the basketball went down. That's what we call a coachable insight. If you're covering him, he still may just make him dribble. Like, you know, just keep moving and make him dribble because he'll become less efficient. In time, the game will be different. It's already different. There's one guard, I forget who, he only shoots 3-pointers and layups, nothing in between. And that has to do with this efficiency measure of what people have. So that is kind of the money ball of other sports, but not every sport has it. Baseball, the Braves still don't care. They just forget it, they don't care. Whereas the Mets, they've always cared. They just care. In the A's, they've been in the movies, so I guess they have to care. And so that, but then there's other sports like NASCAR, they're still trying to figure it out. In terms of like, I mean, that's hard. Soccer, some people do, some people aren't sure, but the German team had a lot of analysts this summer analyzing stuff, and they told nobody that they were doing it. And they won the World Cup. And then they announced it to everybody. But if you think about it, like I have a friend that does analytics for the NBA. He would never tell anyone anything. Jason, what are you working on? Nothing. I can't talk about it. I mean, do you work on like age curves? I don't talk about that. It's just like, okay, did you see a movie? Yeah, I can talk about that. You know what I mean? It's just the way, because everything is that competitive edge, that 1 or 2%. But there's one important thing in terms of that, underneath that question that you asked. Generally, when you do sports analytics, you're not going to win 20, 30 more games because of it, except a Hollywood movie. Generally, you're talking a difference of 1 or 2 points per game in basketball, which is the difference in 3 to 4 to 5 to 6 games in the season. That's what you're shooting for. And that's the kind of difference. And but the hardest part is, one, getting a coach to listen at all. But two, if you're the mathematician, is displaying the information in a way that the coach can understand and is that realistic about the amount of time they have to figure out that information. I'm part of a group called National Amateur Sports, which is bringing sports analytics to high schools. One of the people that's part of that is Roman Pfeiffer, who was part of 3 New England teams that won the Super Bowl. Roman talks about it like this. He says, you know, I don't do sports analytics, but any player who plays at a high level is discerning data instantly at any time in the game. And you'll have 2 players, one who may not actually have more athletic talent, but is a way better player. And it's because of that player's ability to compute the game instantly. He seemed to know what was going to happen. Of course I knew what was going to happen, because I knew the tendency of the teams. And now, which when I'm in the room, I go, and now that's when people like Tim can do that too. Everyone's like, I am the mathematician, not a professional athlete. You know what I mean? So it's kind of, but it's true. That if you are not going to be a professional athlete, you can contribute to the team through those types of things. And in your lifetime, that'll become more and more accepted. I mean, that wasn't even, I don't know when that became, I mean, a lot of my life, that wasn't even part of sport. It just kind of, it was the money ball thing, you know? He's ugly, I don't think he's gonna hit. You know what I mean, or whatever it is. Just the way that people think about it. Anybody else? There was some question maybe over there. Yeah.
Yeah, I know you said you don't try to predict luck or chaos in your method, but do you ever take into account anything like player injury or suspensions during the season?
Yes,
That could really affect.
the question was, well, we don't always try to put luck. I'll talk about that. We do put luck in some, and how to do that. And it may not be a good way, but it's one way that we tried it last year. But do we put injury in? We don't account for predicting injury, which some people try to do. We haven't done it a lot in our team. We talk about it. But the bigger one is that if you have an injury, and that injury is not later, then you downweight those games, because the point is that's not predictive of the tournament. So I don't know if that quite answers it, but that's one way to deal with that. In terms of predicting things, one way that sometimes people will do that is that rather than having the ranking you'd have, they turn those into probabilities. And so then they'll say, I'm 70% likely to win. And then they essentially flip a coin. They do a random number generator between 0 and 1, a uniform random number generator. And then say, if it's less than 70, the team that's 70% likely wins, otherwise the other team. That was our best bracket last year. Last year was really hard, and our best bracket did that. It picked Dayton. out of that. It was able to, you got lucky, but Dave may have gotten lucky. I don't know. Is there one in the back? Yes.
Did you help ESPN, whoever offered $1 billion, did you help them figure it was a pretty safe bet to do that?
No, I did not. But it turned out that I was doing a sports night for the Museum of Mathematics in Manhattan, and somebody who worked for Buffett came up to me, and he said, you know, I've been trying to figure out the probability of a perfect bracket. I went, I mean, this is before that had been announced. I went, really? And he went, yeah. And I went, huh. That's an interesting question. I haven't really thought about that. And he kind of laid out this, that's where that 70%, 71% thing came from, was him, in terms of like, because for Buffett, the way last year worked, if you don't know the way it works to insure a bracket, is that what that means is that someone like Quicken Loan paid Warren Buffett's company like $10 million. They just pay him $10 million. Then Buffett has to pay the $1 billion if somebody actually gets the perfect bracket. If they don't, he gets the $10 million. So he made essentially a $1 billion bet that nobody could do it last year. And then my friend, when the second round, I think it was the second round Dayton win. When the Dayton win occurred, he emailed me and said, it's over. And so that meant nobody was perfect anymore. That one went longer than ESPN. So no, I did not help them. But I can't imagine the number of NDAs you'd have to sign. But it's interesting that they're not doing it this year. In mid-January, they had conversations with Quicken Loan, and if they've not announced one, if they do not announce one, this is the year that you try to use these bracket methods, because it means that they think it's more likely that somebody could produce a perfect bracket. So to me, if they don't do it, man, it's all on. I mean, man, every student I know is trying to make a bracket. Oh, but if you're a Division I athlete, you can't submit a bracket to ESPN because you can win money. So if you're a senior and you're done, go for it. But otherwise, compliance, just make one and enjoy your athleticism. I mean, I don't know what else. So, is there one more question, then we'll be done? I thought I saw one more hand. Otherwise, yes.
How does your wife feel about your predictions? Are you beat your family on your most of the brackets?
How does my wife feel? She finds it comical because I've been interviewed for so many years about a homework assignment. She was the one who pointed that out to me. She said, you realize that you've been interviewed for 4 years about a homework assignment. That's a good point. She just pointed it out. You know what I mean? So I've actually never made a bracket for myself, which could sound horrible, but in class, I only do the basic methods, and then they see if they can beat me. I'm not a particularly competitive person, so I pick the 2 worst ones, and they do beat me, and they just love it. I mean, it's just like, and they just talk smack at me for 2 weeks. But I'm really comfortable with that, so it's not a big deal. But I want to tell you one last story, then we'll stop. So think about it. I've never made a bracket up to last year in my life. I've never made one. In terms of, I never made one before. Because to me, Amy and I are both kind of like consummate mathematicians. Why do we do it? Because it's math. Good Lord. You know what I mean? It's like, it's March Madness, I know, but it's math. And that's what we do. But think about it. My son hears that there's $1 billion for a perfect bracket, and his dad does not make one. So my son, 11 at the time, goes, hold on a second. My dad spends all his time talking to all these people. He needs to make a bracket. Like, I won't even need to go to college. I can like quit elementary school. I am retired. You know what I mean? So his name's Noah, and Noah said to me, Daddy, are you going to make a bracket? So they would get dropped off after school, and I would go down and I'd take their hands. He's young enough that we would just hold hands, and we'd walk to the college union. We'd get a snack, which in Daddy language means sugar. And so then they would have their snack, and then we'd walk to my office, and then we would do things from there. It was 2:30. I can't just stop every day at 2:30. So we would go back, and then we would have this routine. So we're walking along, holding their hand. Noah's on the right, my daughter Michaela's on the left. Noah turns to me and goes, Daddy, are you going to make a bracket? I said, you know, Noah, I don't know. With this $1 billion stuff, I'm being interviewed 8 to 12 times a day. I don't know. It's hard enough in any year, but I don't know if I can do it. I'm always trying to help people. Can anybody think the way that he would angle that? It was brilliant in terms of how I would do it. What can you think? What would you ask me given what I just said? Anybody think what he said? No? Oh man, you're just too, what is it, ethics in action? Is that what I saw on your thing? So yeah, okay, anyway. Noah turns to me and goes, Daddy, will you help me?
Yeah.
Of course I will know. But this is the key. You will do the bracket, and I will only complete it when you're stuck. So if you get stuck, I'll do it, but you have to try because it's our bracket. So the only problem with our bracket was I forgot to explain to my son that Oklahoma State and Oklahoma are not the same school. So we got whopped when it came to Oklahoma games. But yeah, it turned out that we competed against the cast of the Matilda Broadway musical. New York Times put us up against it. It was supposed to be me and my son versus the cast of Matilda. They changed the story. It became Noah in my bracket became mathematician's bracket versus the lead cast of Matilda. And I was like, oh boy. So we totally slaughtered them in the first 2 rounds. I forgot who won the tournament last year. Was it Connecticut? Did they win? Yeah. There was one of the girls from one of them was from Wisconsin and one of them was from Connecticut. And so like why did they beat them? That's where they're from. You know, or why did they pick them? That's where they're from. So that's that element of luck. So you know, if you look up in New York Times, you'll see one where they point out that I got completely creamed by some 8-year-old girls. So anyway, if you want to be in the press, just be careful. So and I'm already being filmed, so who knows what some quote we'll get. But that's just the nature of it. All right, thank you for your attention. Have fun this month. Yeah.